Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle, and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network UFO Paranormal Radio Network 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We just could not do it without you. Also, very grateful and honored for his contribution of his time, his voice, and his music for the intro that you just heard. So that's the big thank you to Justin Snicker, aka Dr. Snick the Sonic Surgeon, who's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found anywhere that you love to stream your music. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind all of our banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre, but can basically do amazing commission pieces, books, comic books, you name it. He's your guy. So thank you, Steve. Now, what we're going to be promoting right now is, let me get this up, guys. Bam, bam, bam. So Amelia and I, and of course the Outer Realm, are sponsors of the Halifax Paranormal Symposium. We're very excited for them. This is going to be happening Saturday, October 7th. Sorry, tongue-tied here. It's a full-day event, and there's going to be some phenomenal people. We're going to be showing this throughout the night. Let me get another picture up here just to give you guys an idea of who will be here. Here we go. So we have Kim Moser, who's been on the show. You guys have seen her. You loved her. It was a great show. We've got Lauren Coleman, who's going to be talking about, of course, cryptozoology. We're going to be talking to Richard Gallagher. They've got him as a guest speaker, and he is, I guess, an authority to the church for exorcisms and so on. Psychologist, psychiatrist. This is the guy that they really lean on, and I would love to be there to hear him in person. Darryll Walsh, Dr. Darryll Walsh, who is going to be on the show tonight with Dr. Elliot Van Dusen, who is, instrumental for putting this shindig together. And Chris Stiles, who's been on the show many times and most famous for the Shag Harbor incident out in the West Coast. So again, guys, check him out. Really, it's going to be a fantastic lineup. And I have no doubt that anybody who goes there is going to have a really great go of it. So they're going to be on tonight. We're going to be talking about, NDEs, remote viewing, reincarnation. There's just a lot of things that we want to cover. They're both parapsychologists. In fact, they have a podcast called The Dueling Parapsychologist. They're a whole lot of fun. Elliot's been on the show many times, and Darryll has joined us one night, and it was just a fantastic show. So they're going to be talking about a lot of different things. And again, from a really logical standpoint, which is something I think really time kind of goes missing in the field. But anyway, to partake tonight, we have 7 different chat rooms. So you're going to have to go into the regular ones. Of course, Roku TV, which does not have a chat room. But remember, guys, Superhighway coming down to one lane. We're going to do our best to make sure as many people get addressed as possible. If you don't see it coming up, just remember there's another 6 chat rooms besides the one you're in. So we do have people chiming in. We've got Z-Sun Dragon. I just love that handle. Welcome, Dolly. I always want to break out in song when I see you there. Hi, Ruth. Hi, Tamara. So it's fantastic to see everybody coming in a little bit early. The guys should be here any minute. So it's going to be a tough one because being in the field for 20 years, it's really hard. We really tend to see, people tend to lean a lot on what you see on television. Hey, Chris. And it doesn't mean that's the way things are done. And I'm one of those people, I'll probably say it again during the show. I've said it before, who spent 20 years in media, filming different TV shows and doing all kinds of things. And you sort of get stigmatized because I always say, I'm sure half the world thinks I run around screaming demon. And yet I'm probably that person who runs around screaming psychokinesis more than anything. Try to find the logic. So it's a tough industry. Hi, Kathy. So it is really a tough industry, and there is a lot of things in the field that I think people either just don't think about, just don't care, they have their own method, and that's what they stick to. And it's tough because also as a medium and working with phenomenal mediums, Amelia being one of them, it's really hard because you're picking it up, other people are picking it up, you have all these validations. But if you can't find the logic behind it, it doesn't mean it's not a thing. But it does mean you have to go through the process of elimination. For me, when I go through something and I look at something as potentially, it's hard for me to say the word evidence because it's also hypothetical. But when I come to something that looks like it could be something, I suppose, for me, it just leaves room for further research. That's all. It doesn't mean there's anything definitive about it whatsoever. So we're going to cover a few topics tonight, and we had a real hoot with the guys the last time they were on, and I know it's just going to be really informative and a lot of fun. So you guys just put your seatbelts on, and I believe we have Elliot. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
What's going, man? It's going.
Oh, that's good.
It's been a week, been a month, but it's all good. It's all good. So I guess we're waiting for your partner in crime.
Yes.
Yeah.
He has the link, so he should be here soon.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I had up the 1 minute. I'm going to stop this screen. We're going to do this again. We were just talking about the symposium. So I just shared that up, and we spoke about that for a few minutes. So while we're waiting, do you want to touch on this a little bit? I'm sure we'll do it throughout the show, but
yeah, for sure. So it's coming up really soon, 8 days. Next, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, October 7th, from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. at the Halifax Tower Hotel and Conference Center in Bayers Lake.
Mhm.
It is a fairly new hotel. Very excited about that. We were one of the first people to book at that venue. We have 5 guest speakers coming, all really, really interesting. We've got Dr. Richard Gallagher coming to talk about dynamic possession. We have Lauren Coleman coming to talk about cryptozoology, specifically creatures that have been reported in Nova Scotia. Then we've got Kim Moser, who has been on the Outer Realm before.
She has.
She is a paranormal investigator and has produced a television show, Haunted, on Eastlink.
Yes.
And we have my colleague that'll be joining us there tonight, Darryll Walsh. He is going to talk about Our Ghost Extinct, kind of talk about, how we used to see that full body apparition of the lady in the white dress or the blue dress, and now it seems to be all technology and iPhone apps and things like that. Just kind of talk about how it's changed. And then last but not least, we have Chris Stiles, who's also been on the show, to talk about his new book and his new revelations about a Shelburne USO incident, 2 underwater UFOs that were allegedly being repaired by extraterrestrials, according to the divers that he spoke to. So
yes, it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting. He's been on the show a few times, and there's never enough time. Whenever you guys, I love, Canadian content. We just don't seem to get enough of it, but without further ado, Darryll. Hey.
Oh, he's made it.
The settings are different for Windows 11 than Windows 10, so I had to try to figure that out on myself. I just went over to Windows 11 last night. So I and believe me, it's like a jungle trying to get to places. And
Sorry, we try to make it as simple as possible.
I know, but you were fine. It was just in Windows 10, you have to have the camera separately turned on.
Oh.
Windows 11, no camera turned on. You turn it on. So
nice.
That's what they changed. I mean, there's so many changes between the two of them, and that's one that just drove me crazy.
Hey man, I'm just happy you got the darn link, because my situation has been something like an atrocity for at least 2 months. But of course, I don't really clue into that kind of technology. I'm just like, oh, all right. People are like, well, I sent you this email. Why didn't you respond? I'm pretty sure I responded to that. No, people weren't getting my emails. I was sending out emails, and I see it. It shows that it was sent. But I guess
I apologize. I was just busy, and I thought I had emailed you back.
Okay, but at least you got it.
Yeah, so I got it, and I thought I had emailed you back, and then this week we got your email where you're saying, "You sons of guns, is anybody getting my stuff?" And it's like,
yeah, way to go, Darryll, as if I wasn't tormented enough.
I was thinking, I think I responded, and then I looked and I couldn't see it, so I was like,
"It's okay, man. As long as you got it." It has just been, who knew? Apparently, like all of these Gmail accounts, they hit a plateau. That's how much mail I get, and then they want you to pay for it, which I'm fine with. But how about a heads up, as opposed to just floating my stuff off in cyberspace somewhere? So yeah. Anyway, so I think we've got a handle on it, and of course, I was always of the belief that Macs don't really get viruses. And I got a computer. It went out and like poof. I'm just like, hello, and nothing. Black, couldn't bring it back. It was just whatever it was. It was a total kiss of death. I know what it was, but yeah, kiss of death. So I figured maybe that's where it was. Maybe there's a virus in there. I'm just like, anyway, we are here tonight. I am just glad I can rant on about technology forever, and we will tonight on a different level. Do you guys want to start with that, since I'm really hyped up about hating on technology?
Yeah, no, for sure. We were going to discuss the role of technology in paranormal investigations. Who wants to start first? Do you want to go,
you
Darryll?
guys go, please.
Well, you're the insane believer in that stuff, so why don't you start us off? And then I'll be able to come in as a sane, rational person.
Okay, let me get the popcorn or the wine, one of the two.
So, I mean, I use or PPRI, I should say, the organization uses some equipment during our investigations. Most recently, we just purchased a Geiger counter, not so much for ghost and haunting investigations, but really good for UFO investigations, especially if somebody is talking about anything, like an encounter of the third kind and up, because usually when we have cases like that and we examine the physical evidence, there's usually detection of radiation. So, but we use obviously like a electronic or electromagnetic field radiation detector. I have two different kinds. I stay away from the K2 meter. I know there's a lot of people out there that have them. It's just one of the cheapest ones available on the market, and it looks good on TV with all the flashing lights, but it's also been known to be super highly sensitive, so you get a lot of false readings with that one. I do stay away from the ITC devices or the intra-trans communication devices. I prefer to go with just a digital recorder, and I know Darryll will have an interesting discussion about digital recorders and magnetic recorders.
His smirk is going to be
yeah, I go with the digital recorders. The stuff on the apps I don't trust. I mean, they're marketed as a ghost a ghost app and an educational app. And we actually have an audio engineer now with PPRI, Peter McMasters. He does all of our electronic voice phenomena analysis. And he's working with a university right now in Canada on after-death communication. And one of the things that they're kind of looking at are these apps. And I know he just recently had me test the EMF app on the iPhone compared to the real app. So my house is 110 years old. I have a century home, but the wiring is all fairly new. So I couldn't get anything near the outlets. But I knew if I turned the microwave on, I was going to get some serious EMF readings. So sure enough, I did. And we were scoring around 16 to 18 milligauss on the EMF, which is quite high. The FDA says that anything above 3.0 is dangerous.
Wow.
So that's why you're not supposed to stand in front of the microwave.
Right.
Now with the phone app,
Wait for it to do something.
the phone app actually had a green light saying everything was okay, and the numbers were fluctuating, but they were only fluctuating by like one or two. When I took the video, like one or two full denominations. So obviously it's not as accurate as a real EMF reader, and they're starting to do some interesting stuff where they're back engineering the technology for the ghost recording apps and the EVP apps. And I know from talking with Peter personally, he has detected some use of AI, some use of language programming. It'll listen to you speak, and it'll kind of feed you back things that you might be looking for. So, which is kind of what we all suspected. So,
Right.
I'll be really interested to see what other kind of work he digs up on that.
Well, a phone is basically a small computer nowadays. You know?
Yeah, and I was actually quite surprised after talking to Peter about the different stuff it can do. So, it does have an EMF reader in it, and to an extent, it also has the capability with GPS and the compass. So that's why when you use apps that are trying to locate ghosts for you, it can actually know like which direction you're pointing and things like that. So it is quite interesting. There's a lot of technology in the phone that could be and is used for ghost hunting.
But it's the app designs that you're saying. It's just like,
but it's the
just
apps,
don't.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they're I think they're personally for entertainment only. That's why, you should go with your older kind of technology, the tape recorders, if you have a magnetic tape recorder, but a digital recorder at the minimum.
Right. All right, Darryll, I know you're itching. I just see it. That's the vibe
first
I'm getting.
Back to the microwave. The thing that said you only had 3 is probably the more correct one, because that's a Faraday cage. And if you're getting 16 to 18 off of it, you've got to throw it out immediately, because no microwave should be putting off that strength. So yeah, it's a Faraday cage. There should be nothing coming through. So check your microwave again, because there might be something wrong with it. But
I like that. So when we get like a 5G radiation shot, just turn around, throw your cell phone in the microwave and unplug it.
So if you're seeing ghosts in the kitchen, Elliot, I check the microwave.
Well, if I do, I don't know who to call.
It's like crap. I'm alone.
Oh my! Where does one start? Where's one start? Really? Okay. I have a philosophy that no, I can't go there because that's a lecture, and you don't want to lecture.
Hey man, it's your show. You guys just do what you want to do.
I forget I'm not Dr. Walsh here. I'm just, well, I am, but I'm just, supposed to make it as easy as possible. There's not been one single proven use for any technology to find a ghost or prove a ghost. True. The only time it's great for finding things that make you think you see a ghost. It's great and of course it's great for the reasons it's made for. But when the old P.T. Barnum saying a sucker's born every minute, the marketers of those things thought, oh, we can just sell it to everybody and as a ghost detector and all that. But they're useless completely and utterly. And you can have as many tape recorders, digital or magnetic, as you want. They're also useless because A, they've never been proven, but B, if it can, why would the ghost do that? Why would put a voice on a recorder and not just speak to you, especially if you're trying to have a conversation with it? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Okay, so playing devil's advocate, pardon the pun. So sometimes you can't, maybe it's a frequency thing. Maybe you can't hear the frequency of a ghost speaking to you.
Our ears are better than tape recorders.
Sure.
Well, so if the tape record picks it up, we had to have picked it up.
Well, maybe we thought we heard something, but we're just not, tuned in enough to say, wait a minute, did I hear something? But the tape recorder, it's just like an imprint. I'm funky with digital stuff, but I like the old tape recorders.
Yeah. They're
you
cool.
know, or like a Polaroid camera, because you can't really fudge around with that negative too much. Like, isn't there anything that you're on board with, Darryll? Throw me a freaking bone.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Okay,
there's a saying that there's a saying that ghost hunting is technological but not scientific, and that's so true. Because if we were doing a ghost investigation of a house, you'd have to kick the owners out of the house. All dogs are out of the house. All power is severed to the house. You've got to have it for months on end. There's no way you can go in there in an hour or 2 hours and figure out. You won't even know how to get around the house, let alone know whether there's a ghost there. Now, here's where it comes. I do believe in ghosts. I just don't know what they are. But in order to tell if a place is truly haunted, and this can be either a surviving consciousness after death, or it can be the residual haunting, whereas some acts somehow are imprinted, probably through meteorology and electromagnetic, onto something, rock, wall, building, whatever. Unless you see it with your eyes, and that's the only way that you can tell. And the problem is, a ghost is not this ethereal, see-through, transparent thing. It's solid and three-dimensional. You literally could have been next to a ghost many times in your life. You never would have known unless you walk through them, of course. So yeah, and the one time I saw a ghost, he was totally 3D. I mean, it was weird, but and then once you've got the ghost, okay, well, we know the ghost is at X, Y, and Z, and we know it shows up every Thursday at midnight. So that's when you move all the stuff in. And then if the ghost appears, well, then the technology is needed, because then you want to know what's going on. Because if they live on a different plane, let's say, and we don't know what's completely there after death, so we'll use that euphemism. If they live in a different atmosphere, perhaps multiverse, whatever one you want, if they come into ours, there must be something. We must be able to see,
like a dimensional bleed through.
Yeah, there's going to be a leakage and interaction between the two, and so that would be the most important thing to look at. You could ignore the ghost after that. Just get the equipment there. Who cares if the ghost? Don't follow the ghost. Just get the equipment right to where the ghost appeared, and then that would lead eventually on to just developing technology that can do that and possibly even force an interaction. That would be the holy grail, because you want to understand what's going on. And let's assume if it's a discarnate, consciousness from a deceased person. Obviously, if it's a residual haunting, it would be something totally different. But that's what we would want to do. That's the holy grail. A, prove there's a ghost is a discarnate consciousness, and B, understand the interaction, and then maybe we'll be able to force, something, a probe, anything, to see what's going on. What is there after death? Right now, the near-death experiences are doing a pretty good job, but that's limited to a certain amount of time. And if we could put a probe in there or something, it'd be fantastic. I mean, that's well down the line before we'd able. I mean, we can't even find a ghost, let alone a true ghost, let alone.
So how do you define a ghost? How does Darryll Walsh define a ghost?
Well, Darryll Walsh defines a ghost personally. Like I said, I believe in them, but I don't know what they are. Right. But if I was to guess, or prefer, probably might be a better way of putting it, I would like it to be, an unconscious, discarnate entity. And in which case, going by the history of hauntings and ghosts all the way back through to the Bible, they've always appeared. Now, there's been slight changes all through time, mostly through the way we perceive them, but they have changed radically, actually, if you want to go way back to the Bible. But one thing that hasn't changed is they're solid. That's like sort of the one thing that's come through. Yeah. So if I see a solid representation of a person that just suddenly appears or disappears or cannot possibly be at the location. That could include doppelgangers, but let's just say somebody's uncle died, or we follow the widow home, and then all of a sudden we see the deceased sitting in the rocking chair like he used to. That would be a ghost right there. Right. That's all you need to know. So yeah, that's the thing. It's a high bar, and many people have. Many authors, including Hans Holzer, has got tired of trying to find a ghost. So what he would do is yank a psychic into a house, and she'd spell a little story. He'd write it down, and off you go. And he's got a book like that thick.
Because he's Hans Holzer.
Right. So it's
So let me present this to you. Let me present this to you, because this isn't so much a ghost, but I'm thinking of a projection of energy. So you guys can chime in. I'll use my mother as an example. When my father went into assisted living, he somehow, Alzheimer's, so the brain, it just works differently, But my mother would be awake. Just getting herself ready to go to bed. She was sitting in bed one night, just kind of getting ready to turn the lights off. She turns around and my father is there. I mean, she reached out to touch me because she goes, am I just like having a moment, or they stepped into the door and I didn't know? She reached over, touched him. It was physical.
Yeah.
The next morning, she called the assisted living home and said, on the by and by, did he leave the building? Is there something, you guys aren't telling me? They're like, no, he was asleep by this point. At like by 9:00, he was, we get all the residents down and that's it. Projection of energy is
that comes under a doppelganger, which was very much in fashion.
It happened
100 years ago. Some researchers have tried put ghosts and doppelgangers together. One is dead, one's alive, so I can't see how they really go together. But maybe, I see them as a separate columns. I can't actually see because the interactions, projection of a live person would be totally different from a projection of a person, because
individual.
They have to come into our thing. But doppelgangers are, they're not being studied very often now, are they, Elliot? They just kind of went out of fashion.
No, you don't hear about them at all. But it is interesting, that experience you share, because you don't hear too many people talk about touching a ghost.
Exactly.
It's always
the man was alive.
And there are call cases, or there's been cases of living people that have projected themselves. I investigated one after the fact down in Massachusetts. It was a 15-year-old girl dating an abusive boyfriend, and she lived in Rhode Island. They were in Massachusetts. They got into a fight on the highway. He took her head and smashed it out the window, and then kicked her out of the car. At the same time all this was happening, the mother that was back home in Rhode Island witnessed it all take place, but it happened inside the car, outside in their driveway. And so then the car kind of disappeared. And when she got home later that night, the mother was all over her, saying, after he hit you, why didn't you come back in the house or whatever? And the daughter had no idea what she was talking about. And then she said, I saw everything happen in the driveway or whatever. And she said, that didn't happen in the driveway. That happened like in another state.
Wow.
But again, the mother didn't come out and like grab the car door or anything like that. So we don't know what would have happened. But I find it interesting that
it's interesting how
she touched an apparition.
She touched him and he just sat there. But I'll tell you, on the night she passed away in beginning of April, my father, within like literally 2 minutes of her passing, the home phoned my sister and said, your father's completely violent and out of control. She goes, my mother just died like a minute ago. And that was it. The next day, he's seeing her. And my mother said, oh no, I go see your father all the time. All right. Just touching it. Just
wow.
Like, okay.
Well, that's an interesting one. I will say though, it's I know Darryll was hitting on a lot of full apparitions, non-transparent, but I will say there are a lot that are also reported to be semi transparent as
Yes.
well. It's either fully transparent, like Darryll said, like where you wouldn't be able to tell that it's
I've
not
seen
another
full
person.
body. Yeah. I mean, they
or
look pretty
there,
solid. Doesn't mean they are to the touch, though.
and there are saying, some that are translucent. And an interesting study that was done as well, Lloyd Auerbach usually talks about it in his educational programs, is that a lot of people don't normally see the feet of people. And they did a psychological study that when you ask somebody what they're wearing, they'll usually describe, their shirt and their pants and stuff like that, but they don't normally like talk about their shoes or their socks. And so it's kind of interesting that when people do see apparitions, a lot of times it kind of stops at the ankles.
I never actually noticed that when I would see them. Like I think for me, it's you're sort of in shock at first to see a full body. I don't look him all the way up. I had a conversation with one time on a ghost tour, and he just sort of some random man that smelled like lemons and lime, but he goes back to the or oranges, like citrus. And I mean, if you go back to Victorian times, they would put lye on the body and put a bunch of oranges and citrus to kind of mask the smell of decomposition, right? And he's this guy in like old overalls, coveralls sort of thing, and he points to the tour and he goes, "Is that yours?" I'm like, "Well, I suppose sort of." And I'm looking at him, I'm going, "You're not right." I just know, because his eyes weren't right for me. They were just very, very dark, and he never blinked. He just looked, and I'm going, "You want to tag along?" And he just smiled. I was getting ready to just poke him because I'm like, "Oh, screw it. I'm just going to do it, make a joke about it. And just, it's a ghost tour. I could get away with it." Right.
Yeah.
And I had a couple come up to me and they said, "Who are you talking to?" I'm going, I realized I was the only one that could see him. And there was like 50 people looking at me going, "We just see you're all animated and you're by yourself." Great.
Wow.
And we look like a freaking raving lunatic on a sidewalk in a cemetery by myself.
Well,
So
no,
that was it. Yeah.
it's interesting you mentioned that none of the other witnesses saw, because Darryll and I had investigated a residual haunting up towards Pictou County there, and there was a husband and his wife, and then they had a couple over, so there was four of them, and only the husband saw the apparition. The other three people didn't see it at all, and he saw not just one apparition, but he saw the apparition of two kids as well, playing up in the apple tree. So he saw three apparitions, and none of the other three witnesses saw anything.
That's really interesting. We saw a man who was standing by himself, total skeptic, did not want to be in the ghost tour. Goes, "My wife forced me to come here, and I just want you to know that right off the bat." I'm like, "Noted." Okay. So we got to the same cemetery because it was a really historical thing. And then the priest had come out and told us all kinds of stories about it. And they gave us full permission to do part of the tour here. This man, at one point, the wife was with me. She goes, "I haven't seen my husband in about 10 minutes. I'm like, so maybe got picked up by a ghost. I'm joking. Okay. Well, I go back. The man is standing there with his hands straight out like this. And I'm going, "Something wrong?" He goes, "Something has me by the hand." I'm going, "Okay." He goes, "I can't move." I'm like, "Just pull your hand back." "Can I do that?" I said, "I promise you won't lose it." "Sure, just pull it back." And it turned out one of the mediums that said it's a child and had him by the hand. He says he felt cold little icy fingers. The rest of us are all like watching this man with his hand out there kind of going. So I don't know, projection of energy, guys, chime in. Those are the examples that I can give that I have witnessed. Otherwise,
Yeah, I mean, until you can capture one and put them in a laboratory to figure out,
tell the skeptical guy that.
what's going on with that. I mean, it is hard to say. Like I said, not too many people have said that they've touched a ghost or an apparition. Usually, like you said, the normal reaction is fear or shock.
Yeah.
Or there's
this is what I do, and I still get taken back.
Yeah, there's some sort of distance usually between the person that sees it and the spirit themselves. So that's really interesting. But going back to the technology thing too, I will also say the interesting thing is I've worked lots of investigations where there's been cold spots, and you'll actually react to it with goosebumps on your skin and the hair standing up. but the equipment doesn't pick up that particular cold spot.
So
And where
essentially,
all this,
you are your best piece of equipment in your reaction.
you definitely feel it better than the scientific equipment that is
Right.
used. And where this comes from, like Darryll said earlier about the theory about if a ghost comes from the spirit realm into our physical realm, that there must be some sort of change or energy shift. So that's where the EMF comes from. And then the temperature is from tons and tons of people experiencing those cold and also hot spots. A lot of people forget that hot spots can occur. Actually, last investigation we did, we had a medium there with us, and she was communicating with the spirit. And as their conversation kept going, she felt like she was getting colder and colder. But I actually had the FLIR with me, the forward infrared looking thermal camera. And she actually, her body got 2 degrees Celsius hotter. Even though she felt she was getting colder. So you just never know. I mean, the equipment is good and handy to have, but I wouldn't rely on it so much. I mean, the investigations I've done, like I said, the temperature, the thermometers, they're not doing what they should be doing. They're not picking up what we want it to pick up.
Right.
They are the weakest part of the whole thing, besides the obvious BS stuff like ghost detectors and that. But of the technological, real technological stuff that you can bring to a haunting, Geiger counters, et cetera, EMF meters, temperature is the hardest because when you, especially, if you point, most of them will take it either right where you are or across the room. So how do you manage to, so it'll go through, a cold spot, a hot spot, a medium spot, whatever, and tell you what's on the side of the wall. So it could have missed God knows what. So they're the kind of the weakest link of everything, is because of the fact that they are so finicky and have to be very well calibrated before.
I knew somebody who used a turkey thermometer. Don't get me started. I'll leave it right freaking there. Okay.
Should I ask where the turkey thermometer goes?
Maybe should have went somewhere else. But let me tell you something. Yeah, I'll leave that right there because I'm public. But that investigation, things roaming around, and I was going, what am I doing here?
That's a new one. I've never heard that one before.
Had to be there, Elliot. Had to be there. Yeah. So, okay. So, I mean, not electronic. I'll give him that. It wasn't electronic.
True.
It was creative. Give him some creativity there. Yeah. And yeah. So, okay. So, equipment. So, the existence of ghosts, do you think ever in this lifetime, the way technology is going with AI and everything else, are we ever going to get anything really definitive? I mean, definitive is a strong word in a field that's completely unexplained, but do you think we're ever going to get there? I think AI is potentially taking us the other way because so many things can be fudged, recordings, photos, video. You don't even know what you're looking at anymore. Right?
Yeah, photos and videos aren't worth anything anymore. It was funny. I just did a lecture not too long ago here in Sydney, Nova Scotia. I do one called Hauntings, Exploring Apparitions, Poltergeists, and Demons. And I used to show a photo of my niece and nephew. It was a professional photo that was done. And the only thing that was real in the photograph was Colton and Annie, and then their clothing. Other than that, everything else, the bench that they were sitting on was fake. The reflection in the lake was fake. And this was way before AI was available. And now you can do all that kind of stuff, no problem. I actually made a PowerPoint presentation for a friend's mother's funeral, and they didn't want the ex-wife in the picture, so they asked me if I could somehow remove her. So I found a website where you basically just take a crayon and you just rub it over the thing that you want to change, and it actually takes all the pixels and blends it in so that it looks like the environment. It was amazing. I did it in like 2 seconds.
There you go. So you almost have to go back to film, and even then keep it away from the computer so it can't be fudged, essentially, right?
Well, I always say the 35 millimeter are some of the best. It's hard to find, and it's more expensive now, but at least you can send the negative away to have the negative analyzed. Darryll had a really cool ghost photo. I'm on him all the time to try and find it, but
I did. I've just found it day before yesterday.
It was really cool. It was from back during our Center for Parapsychological Studies days. I'll let Darryll tell the story about it, but it was a really cool photo that somebody had shown to him, and it's one of the first ghost photos he had seen.
What had happened, this was about 1997, 98. I'd say 98 probably. I had been teaching parapsychology for a couple of years at this point, and at the Nova Scotia Community College. And so anyway, did I get a letter or a call? I think I got a letter. And saying, I have a ghost photo. Can we meet? Here's my phone number, type of thing. So arranged to meet her. But I was running late. And especially back in the 90s, I looked incredibly young, like I should be like 15. And so when I showed up, I didn't have time to get into the, the professional looking garb. And it was just a busy day. And so anyway, you could just see in her eyes, thinking, okay. Anyway, after 10, 15 minutes talking to her, then she realized I knew what I was talking about. And I was just a young looking, person. But, and it was really cool because they had been in Scotland, and she had taken a picture. It was at a graveyard, but not of the graves. And she had just decided to take a picture of what the view would be from the graveyard. And so she did. And on one of them, it's the strangest thing, up in the upper right-hand corner, there's an image of a man in very old clothing. You don't see very much from the neck pretty much down. It more or less just kind of fades away. But he obviously had the old, tall collars with the very thin thing and something in there. And it actually reminded me of Edgar Allan Poe, because that's what he kind of looked like. And unless they were fooling us with Edgar Allan Poe picture superimposed on the negative. But I can't see a lady in her late 70s at that time really going for that. But, I could see if it was a young person playing a prank, but unfortunately, she's undoubtedly dead by now, so we can't go back and talk to her. But I still have the photo, and we did take it to have it looked at, just looked at, not analyzed. She would not let the negative out of her hands, and so we could not definitively say that it was a ghost. We couldn't definitively say it was anything really. Just it was extremely interesting and really cool. And so, but when we took it into, I think it was Tarzan Mosher, and, they went over it and the picture, and he said, well, I can't explain it because, and especially since I don't have the negative, but I can't explain it, but, and he just didn't want to say it, but he smiled, someone brings in a ghost photo. He thought it was probable ghost because usually they're a little more, a fake ghost picture is usually a little more complex. And
very defined as well, aren't they?
And it just it just didn't there was there was something wrong parapsychologically in the fact that he how did it get there? There were a bunch of stuff that it could be, but there was a bunch of problems that could also be. So, I always stayed on the, I call it a ghost photo, and I've always been on the fence and on it because I don't have the negative. So I can't say it's not a ghost photo. I also can't say it is one. So that's all I can say, and about it.
You don't see it. You don't see it. When I did an event at one time, and a woman showed up who had visited that location like 15, 20 years prior, maybe even more, like the 70s, late 70s. And she captured a photograph with a film camera of a ghost in the building. And she came to present that to people during the event. And do you know how many, especially young people, had no freaking idea what that was? And she had framed the negative so it could be put up, over a screen to be looked at. And she had a picture of it, the actual photograph. And they're like, oh no, there's no way, because it was really a phenomenal picture. And she goes, here's a negative, and you could see it perfectly. And people were just like, the adults, obviously, we all knew what a negative was, but kids, teenagers, they're just like, in a digital world.
true.
You forget.
It's true. I was at a hockey tournament last year. Yeah, last year. And one of the young police officers that plays on the team, he would have been in his early 20s, had never heard of or didn't know what a cassette tape was. And the other younger guy, at the table, I asked him because I knew he was like just as young, and he said he knew what it was, but he never owned one. But he said he only knows it because he sells cars and he works in the car industry. And that's just like, holy smokes, like. So they wouldn't even understand that kind of technology that we used to use, but and now it's all phones and stuff like that. But
it's true. That's true.
It's interesting. I don't know if you'll ever. It's hard to say right now. Like there's multiple different things that can cause ghosts. Like Darryll said, when we get asked, do ghosts exist? My answer is yes. Like thousands of people have reported them for centuries, way back to first recorded civilization, Mesopotamia, and it's a matter of what are they though, because we know that certain environmental conditions can cause people to see it, such as the work done by the late Dr. Michael Persinger here in Canada with his God helmet and the increase in electromagnetic energy, which can cause people to see apparitions. We know that there's residual hauntings, which seem to be energy recorded in the environment that somehow replays. But then we also know that there's been cases of intelligent hauntings where a spirit's been able to give certain information to a medium that the investigators can then go corroborate by pulling death records and finding out names and birth records and housing records, and some of them can communicate intelligently through taps or raps. So
that's the old-fashioned way of doing things. Like when I started out, I went to Efton Science in Toronto. That's where I bought my stuff. It's just I wanted logical things.
I just saw the comments there too. Someone had a good point about certain time period ghosts might not understand what a recorder is, and we usually take that into account.
Trying to find it. There's so many.
When we're at investigations, for example, like at the Fortress of Louisbourg, when we go out there, none of those people would have saw a digital recorder before. In the spirits that are out there, so we usually tell them a red flashing light or the thing on the table or whatnot to try and put it into perspective, because the theory is that once you pass on, your consciousness and your personality go into the spirit realm. So we're not quite sure what happens from there. A lot of it's circumstantial, and we have to base a lot of it off of information from mediums, which is unfortunately, like a lot of it can be good information that could be corroborated, but at the end of the day, it's all subjective information.
I'll stick with the near-death experience, just because of the fact that science, in the hands of people who want to understand our brains after death, are getting closer and closer, and pretty much the last 2 years have proved that it is after death. The body is gone. There is nothing there, and they pull them back, and they tell this. They tell the story that everybody knows. So I'm not going to go through it all. But one of the things I always had about saying the body is dying, okay, and it's starting. Okay, all the organs are failing, and the lights are starting to go out and everything. So the brain is then going to start to create this wonderful vision and mirage of of seeing your old friends in a beautiful landscape and blah blah blah. And I'm thinking,
are you going to ruin this for everybody, Darryll?
I'm going to say the damn brain is dead or dying. It doesn't have time to create this fantasy. So the near death, I always say this is evidence for a near death experience, because the brain's too busy trying to stay alive and losing dead. And so it doesn't have time, to make this beautiful. It would have to be evolutionary development that would be adaptive for the humans. And before we were able to bring people back, a lot more people died of many things. So how is that evolutionary adaptation? It doesn't serve anybody because they're dead. So, but a near-death experience, it could be like that the spirit
your essence travels somewhere and sees this and comes back and can speak of it. It may not be something that's created by the brain at all.
Yeah.
No,
if
for
we
sure.
can find someplace, probably the right temporal is organ.
There was just an article Darryll and I were reviewing there today from Psychology Today. If anyone's interested in it, it's called "Dying People May Be Conscious Up to an Hour After Flatlining." It's by Dr. Sam Perina that has done the 2 AWARE studies before, which is when they got permission to do studies on people that were dying, and they were able to, if they resuscitated them and they came back, they were able to interview them and get their kind of near-death experience. He's done 2 projects like that, but his latest one, when they got a call that the patient was in cardiac arrest, they'd come in and hook up a bunch of different equipment and a lot of brain equipment, fMRIs and things like that. And what they found is the scans were actually different from what they were. So they would tell the story, the near-death experience story, but they said that certain parts of the brain that were lighting up that would have been like a hallucination due to, death, like Darryll said, the body's trying to cause you to be at peace and kind of create this wonderful story, are actually 2 different things. So the people that were experiencing near-death experience, none of those hallucination type areas of the brain were lighting up. So very fascinating. And just before that study, there was another one that said the brain still functions 7 minutes after death. So like Darryll said, right now the near-death experience research is pretty wild right now, and we might get.
Yeah, I wish Amelia was here. She died like 4 times.
Yeah, you were saying that. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I know a lot of gifted people, but she's probably the most gifted person. You just come back with stuff that is just.
Some people just have such amazing stories. Like I interviewed one person in one of my law enforcement books that I wrote, and it was a police officer got into a car accident during the winter, and he ended up surviving. And months later, after rehab, he went to visit his partner that was the first on scene that helped him out. And he hadn't spoken to her at all since the accident. And he ended up recounting literally everything, because he said he could watch it from up above. He was up in the sky, kind of like looking down, and he knew what she did. He knew that the paramedics had pronounced him dead. But then once he got to the hospital, they were able to revive him. Like he had all these different facts that you wouldn't know unless, you were there and saw it. So,
if you guys are working, I'm just trying to find the name as we're talking, but I'll look for it and send it to you. If you're researching near-death experiences, I had a woman on the show. Now she's quite elderly now, but she's been in the field for like decades of near-death experiences. And I believe she has a doctorate, and she's just full-on logical. She's written books on this, and she's just out in BC, I believe.
There's something fascinating about near-death experiences, besides the fact that, like I said, that the brain just doesn't have time to create this nice vision for us. But essentially what had happened, near-death experiences really exploded in the 1970s and early 80s, early to mid-80s. And at that time, most religions and that said, no, it's actually demons, in particular Christian denominations. No, that's demons, whatever. But near-death experiences were still being done by through scientific institutions and scientists. And then it started to kind of reach a critical mass where people were starting to read the books a lot more. And then started the amateur books coming out, where everybody and their dog was having a near-death experience. And it was before death. I mean, I'm sorry, you got to be dead. It can't be that your life's in danger, a threat like that. You have to be dead. You know what I mean?
And that's why it's
near death. It should be called after death, because that's what we're trying to find out. And then in the 2000s, it switched over, and now the religious groups are now have embraced near-death experiences, did a complete 180, and are now and the problem is, again, there's a lot of stories again by people that are trying to buttress their feelings and their beliefs in God, and I believe in God, but so if you're going to study near-death experiences, you got to be, I don't want to be elitist, but not anybody without a PhD, first of all, forget them. Two is make sure that they're also not involved in, they wouldn't have any ideology or religiosity that would entail this. Go back to the originals in the 70s and 80s before you start to buy the latest, guide to heaven and all this, the people you meet in heaven and all that kind of stuff. Because this is one of the few ghosts went down this line, and Bigfoot went down this line where the experts were investigating and finding really good data, and then in came everybody else and their dog and took it over. And so now ghost hunting's got a bad reputation. Bigfoot searching has got a bad reputation, deservedly. Both of them have deservedly bad reputations. So be careful with near-death experiences, because the fact that you've got to pare through the people who are going to be using it for, either just to tell a story and sell books, just for, money, or to forward, their Christian beliefs or their Muslim beliefs or whatever it happens to be. I'm not picking on Christians alone. So you've got to be very careful with
I think with anything, you have to be careful. I've spent 2 decades filming, and I say it all the time. Half the world thinks I run around screaming demon, yet I'm one of the most logical people I know, and probably scream like psychokinesis more than anything, projection. And so you get really stigmatized, like I can give 5, 6 logical answers for something, but they want the most obscure. Well, could it be this? Well, yes, I guess it could be this. Say it. Why? All right. Because, hypothetically, it could be, but it's like nobody wants to hear the logic. Like, do you find that you guys run into that? Because it is logic. When I have to tell somebody, no, you don't have a demon in the house, I send them a link to psychokinesis, and I'm like, if you see any similarities in here, we can talk about it. It's harder for somebody to believe that they can project energy, that, they're powerful enough individual for whatever it is that's going on in their lives to make them project, than it is for them. It's easier for them to think that there's something malevolent in the house.
We did run into one case like that, but it was a very interesting investigation. It actually made it into a scientific journal. I passed. I realized that the lady needed to see a clinical parapsychologist, which is fairly new. So a clinical parapsychologist is somebody that has a background in parapsychology. So they usually have their PhD in parapsychology, but they're also a practicing clinician, either a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And Darryll probably remembers this case. He did more supervising on it than the investigation. But the lady had actually undergone a medical for another paranormal investigator group. So I simply asked, I said, well, are you able to provide us with those medical records? So something came back in the medical records that led us to believe that it's not, paranormal.
Right.
So,
And how does she feel about that? Because I work with families like hardcore. I will ask for psychiatric assessments ×2 and permission from that doctor to work with that person.
Well, they did provide the medical records, no problem. But and when they told me that there was nothing in it, I was like, okay, perfect. So then I got it and I reviewed it, and I saw the first thing they got flagged for was delusional disorder. And then when we confronted them on the delusional disorder, they were delusional about the delusional disorder. So I realized at that point that it wasn't a haunting, it wasn't psychokinesis, which they were totally against. Like you said, they thought that it had to be something malevolent. It wasn't even a good spirit. It was something nasty.
Yeah.
And I ended up recommending her to. I found Dr. Jim Horan was willing to deal with her, and they ended up doing an article called "Haunted People" in one of the scientific journals, and had mentioned my organization. So you do kind of run into that occasionally, but I have also been to a place where it sounds like it could be a poltergeist case or psychokinesis and not a haunting. And some people are open to it, but the one that I had that was resistant to it, there was, like I said, medical issues attached to that as well.
And things have changed, Michelle, since the 90s and early 2000s. People don't look to us for answers anymore. I'm the executive director of the Center for Parapsychological Studies in Canada, as well as Ghost Project Canada and PPRI. I mean, got something in every hand in every pot. And the thing is, Elliot will tell you this too. They used to come to us and ask us to investigate, or what is this, or what is whatever. And the center was started in 1996 because of the fact there was such crappy, National Enquirer level, So we thought we would create a storehouse of reputable information, which we did. And then people, once I started teaching in particular, people then wanted us to consult and go investigate and all that. And then there was a turning point in the mid 2000s, the first decade of 21st century, because all the ghost shows started coming on TV.
I was going to say it was like a resurgent of like ghosts.
And so people don't look for Elliot and I for answers anymore. I mean, Elliot, how many times did we have cases come in? We always had at least 6 or 7 cases on the go, that were in various different levels of completion. And so, I mean, it was always going, and then all of a sudden it stopped. And then I made the connection. Oh, well, they're watching Zach Bagans and they think he's, it, and he knows, and it's like, it's like, oh my God.
I gotta mute the mic for a minute. I feel a fur ball coming on. No, sorry.
So I understand. And it's not. So now they think it's all green light in basements.
Unfortunately, you have a lot of people who don't get out much, or they don't know where to go to get educated on things like this. I mean, how many times it's on social media or it's on television, and I call them, couch investigators, and kudos to them. I'm glad that people can get a glimpse of what it's about and form their own opinions. And you do get those people out there that are like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And they want to know, okay, wait a minute, what is something more tangible? And then you get the people who hang on everything that, that they see. And that doesn't make things much easier.
No, that's true. And one initiative as part of, PPRI is education.
Right.
Because we basically have 3 objectives: investigation, research, and education. And the Center for Parapsychological Studies does a lot of the research, and we do a lot of the investigation. And we work together. But what we decided to do is create the Parapsychological Education Center, which we just launched this September. It's going to be an online place that you can take parapsychology courses. All the instructors are going to be, picked because of their background. So, for example, this fall, Darryll and I are going to teach Introduction to Parapsychology, which we used to do at the Nova Scotia Community College many years ago. And it's an 8-week course. And then I'm going to teach an Introduction to Demonology course. I've taken 2 academic courses in demonology, one through University of Glasgow. So I have a fascination with demonology, which actually has more like an anthropology and religious kind of connotation to it, but we're going to do a 4-week introduction course to that. And then later on down the road, we're going to develop some other courses as well, like for example, an Introduction to Electronic Voice Phenomena course taught by our audio engineer. And we're going to have some really cool and unique things that other places aren't doing, such as
I think it's great
work.
because you're right, people don't do it. I mean, some of the universities I think will add parapsychology to their psychology courses, because I used to have a lot of psychology students say, can we tag along like on a tour with you, or can, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Just because we have a week, and it wasn't very long. I think they only got a week or 2 weeks of actual parapsychology towards the end of the course. So they would come along and try to get a feel for it. And they were a lot of fun because they would just add so much logic to the stuff, but they had some like really good questions. And I like to think that those students went on thinking, okay, we actually got logical answers to what we were experiencing or not experiencing, or they would do great experiments too Like, do you mind if we do experiments while you're doing a tour? I don't care, man. Have at her.
Well, well, yeah. I mean, a lot of the parapsychologists that are in academia, they've gone on and done basically their PhD in psychology, and
Yeah.
they do research in parapsychology, kind of from the corner of their desk. Because some of them like to kind of sneak it in. Like they'll say, "Yeah, we're going to study, consciousness and deaths." But then you
Yeah.
find out, like, once the report comes out, that it was actually like a near-death experience research
Right.
project kind of thing. So,
Right.
yeah,
I
no, for
love it.
sure.
I think it's great. Okay, I'm gonna get one that's a little bit closer to home. Remote viewing.
Remote viewing.
Ooh, when Elliot's the one that goes,
I
not Darryl. I gotta worry.
I fi no, I
I
find
expect it from
I
Darryl.
find remote viewing interesting. One course I did, they got us to do a remote viewing, practical exercise, and,
Right.
the one thing that was interesting about it is I was completely off. I was way off, like nothing.
Yeah.
I saw a bridge, I saw, like, mountains, I saw, like, a body of water, I saw a park bench, all this stuff, and it was, like, something completely different. It was, like, a fun house, from Halloween, like
Yeah,
a
that's way
Halloween fun
off.
house with,
Right.
like, all
Like,
kinds
did they
of
give you
Halloween
coordinates that you had to?
decorations. Yeah, you knew, like,
Yeah.
the coordinates and, who was gonna be there, what time it was gonna happen
Right.
at, and,
Okay.
you had to
That's
focus for
CIA
about
methods.
20,
Yeah.
30 minutes. But what I did find interesting is that there was, like, 6 of us in the class that had, like, kinda like a similar, description as what I just gave, even though it
Oh.
was completely wrong. Like, someone else saw, like, a body of water, but it might not have been a lake, it might have been an ocean, and there was a bench, but it wasn't at a park, it was on a beach, and so it was really kinda interesting that, like, you have
The funhouse thing wasn't even a thing.
no, no, I don't even know if I don't think anyone even got the fun house, thinking back to it, but I just found it interesting that you have, like, 20 people all focused at the same time across different time zones on, like, a particular location,
Right.
and then 6 of those people ended up, like, kinda picking up different things even though it was incorrect. So, remote viewing I find very fascinating. Obviously, the government finds it very fascinating because
Something to
there's
it.
been some government, experiments and stuff done on that.
Mhm.
Um, but
Yeah.
I mean, that's my take on it. I think it's like almost like mediumship abilities. Certain people probably have the ability to, maybe get
Mhm.
that information, that precognition, I guess, or
Right.
cognition at the time.
It's gotta be somewhat easy to do. I mean, people offer courses on it online, and some of the people just swear by that. And I'm just like, oh, so you don't have to go to the CIA to do it because you'd want to or not. Darryl, it's your
Yeah.
take. Oof.
Um,
I feel that vibe coming.
well, let's see. I have a problem with psychics and parapsychology for like ghost hunting and this kind of thing, because when someone brings a psychic along, and I'm going to guarantee nobody's going to want to work with me that's psychic now, I'd have to test them for psychic ability for 2 years before I'd let them near a ghost hunt. Okay, as a medium, because I don't know if they can, I don't know. And in the case of remote viewing, everybody canceled everything after a while because there just wasn't enough stuff that was good, provable. But some of the people that were the remote viewers, oh, if you listen to them, it was, blah, blah. It was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we were so successful, and blah, blah, blah. In which case, then you ask, well, why is nobody doing it now? But so the same thing for remote viewers. I mean, you give them a GPS coordinate, but how's that supposed to work? Does the brain or consciousness or essence go
Have you ever
to
asked a
the GPS
natural
book and
remote
the
viewer?
map and, come down and look for that thing before they
Yeah.
get to see what's there? I can't say it's bullshit, but
Right.
because
Because I mean the coordinates thing, that's like CIA, that's very regimented. Natural
yeah,
remote viewers look very differently. I mean, I know people, and Elliot knows who I'm speaking to. I don't like to speak for anybody else, but who's found hundreds of missing children alone, found hundreds through remote viewing, victims of human trafficking, solved murders, can see license plates, can see numbers, peck them off like this. I mean, gads, but that's not like CIA trained. If I tried to give coordinates to this person would go, what? She'd be like, Elliot, I don't see the fun house. Like, I don't know.
Well, the problem is that a lot of people's such successes they're the ones saying how successful they are, and then comes along afterwards.
Documented.
Yeah. They say, oh, it's all documented and all this kind of stuff. But they say, well, the body's by, the corpse will be found near a body of water. That's because most people do, or it's buried in a shallow grave. Okay. All you have to do is watch TV and you'll know mostly you'll be able to give enough.
It's a big world though. Like I'm being devil's advocate again. It's a big world. I know people who have found people worldwide. You can take a good educated guess. But I believe that you do have your legitimate cases out there. But I also believe that those legitimate cases are the ones you don't really hear about.
Probably.
Because they don't really want to be found. Is that would compromise them.
Well, it certainly wouldn't. Let's say it was. Let's say it's totally 100%, it actually works. Well, then you'd wonder why the governments still aren't doing it. But if let's say that you could do it and it got out. Right. And then people would want to, certain governments would want to whisk you away.
But because we're assuming that governments aren't doing it. Maybe publicly, there are organizations, right, that are out there and they're still doing it. I mean, in the U.S., primarily, I think they still keep up with it to a degree. And it's all documented stuff. But I don't know. I think there's just a lot of things out there that we don't understand. Like, like telekinesis, like even telepathy. Some of this stuff is just, it's believed that we as human beings have always been capable of doing it, but either hinder ourselves or you've just been suppressed to the point of, we're just going to put crap in your food and crap in your environment and we're just going to dumb you up. Here's some technology. Look at technology.
I think technology's played a big part in it for sure. Right now, we're struggling with our 3-year-old and the amount of time that she wants to be on like her iPad. And
she's three. Give me my iPad.
She's only 3. Well, we bought her because she always wanted our phones to watch shows. We bought her one of those like cheap refurbished iPads one Christmas from Best Buy, and but she uses it all the time to play Roblox, and like she knows how to play Roblox and like all this stuff. But like her head is in the friggin' iPad all the time.
Yeah,
and it makes you wonder. Makes you wonder. Like I see people, like I'm retired now, but I do have my phone in my hand all the time. But people working, they're constantly checking their emails and they're on their phone and they're answering calls and they're sending.
It's become a lifeline.
Yeah, and it's almost maybe it's going to be part of Darryl's talk there next weekend. But it's almost
like emails that go out and never arrive.
The emails that you send and they go to your junk mail and you never get it. But I think technology is taking away from us being able to just observe our environment, and that could be a reason as well that we're not getting as many ghost sightings as we once were. Everyone's face is just glued to technology.
Which brings me to the next topic, ethics. Ethics.
What ethics?
There we have it.
Are we talking about amateurs?
Ethics of paranormal investigations. Where do you draw the line between exploration and exploitation? I love it. Well worded.
Oh, I know that we were just asked recently. It was actually a CBC radio interview I think I was doing. And they asked me about if our organization does house cleansings, and I kind of laughed because I know that there's still websites out there with people that are mediums that basically charge $500 to do a house cleansing, and it doesn't work the first time, so you got to call them back about 2 or 3 or 4 more times, and then once you're about $2,000-$3,000 into it, all of a sudden your house is cleared. Those types of people still exist, and like I told. I told Sabine when I was speaking to her, I said, that's the whole reason why we got into investigating the paranormal is back in 1882 when the Society for Psychical Research was being bombarded with all these claims from spiritualism. saying that they were contacting the dead. Well, these
Like the
academics
skull
wanted to,
experiment, Phillips experiment, things like that. Yeah.
yeah, the academics wanted to
Yeah.
investigate it and see what was
Yeah.
going on, and they ended up catching quite a bit of fraud. There's been no an ectoplasm.
Hey, Harry Houdini spent how much of his professional life even trying to debunk
Yeah, Harry
spiritualism?
Houdini was a big paranormal
He
investigator.
was.
Yeah, and he actually was very good as well because he had the sleight of hand down because of his magician
That's right.
training. So,
That's right.
which came in handy doing paranormal investigations. But
Mhm.
they caught a lot of frauds. Like, there's been no ectoplasm that's ever been sent to a laboratory that's been determined to be an unknown substance or spiritual substance. Usually turns out to be like regurgitated cheesecloth and things like that. So they caught onto that. The table tipping, a lot of that was done in the dark. I think even in the skull experiment documentary, at one point they said that they didn't want the cameras turned on when they were trying to get things to materialize, and they snuck the
I've done
camera
table
on
tipping in the light.
Yeah, and that's just it, in the light. And
Yeah, I've done that. Daytime. There you go.
our last investigation, we tried to make contact with the spirit, and we did like a seance for less intense purposes. But
Were you successful? Did it happen?
yeah, our medium was able to make contact, but we did it with the lights on, and that was the first thing I said. I said, "We're doing this with the lights on, guys. Like,
Yes.
listen, you don't sit here in
You're
the dark."
haunted. You're haunted, people. It's not going to happen any time of day.
No. Actually, our last case was really interesting from a medium perspective. So we had nothing paranormal happen while we were there, except for what came through the medium, which can be, obviously, like I said, it's subjective information. But what we did is I had heard that Jody was a very good medium, and she's my sister's sister-in-law. So we had this case where items were materializing on the homeowners. They didn't see anything move or materialize, but they were just finding random household items appearing almost very symmetrically.
Right.
And it didn't look like a normal case. So it had my interest because I'm like, is this a fraud here? And like, that's the former police officer in me, like curious, like, am I going to investigate a fraud? Is it going to be a paranormal case? Well, what is this?
Right.
So we brought Jody along, and she made some really interesting disclosures that we were able to corroborate. So one of the first things is the homeowners thought that the house was being haunted by the husband's father. And he had died in 1991 of a massive heart attack. And as soon as she arrived on scene, the only detail she had about the case was what time to show up and where to show up at. As soon as she got there, got out of her car, all of a sudden she felt a pain in her heart, and her left arm went numb, almost like she was taking a heart attack. And that's what she said. She says, "I feel like I'm taking a heart attack. I feel like there's a male entity present at this house." So we didn't tell her anything or corroborate anything with her at that point. As she's doing her walkthrough, she goes into the garage, and she said, "There's something in this garage that belongs to the male energy that I'm feeling." And she picked up a measuring tape, and it turned out that the exact measuring tape she had picked up actually belonged to the homeowner's dad. Then, when she was inside the house, she was having trouble standing on her left leg, and she said she described it as if she's like on the sea and she's kind of like getting seasick, but it was trouble with her left leg. It turned out that the homeowner's mother, who just passed away in January, had to have her left leg amputated because the circulation had just stopped going there. Then, about a week before we show up, the wife was playing cards with a friend. They both put their cards down on the table, went to go get a drink. When they came back, one of the cards was missing. It was the 7 of spades. So one of my investigators, Pierre, gave the medium the deck of cards and said, "Can you tell us anything about these cards, or do you sense anything about these cards?" And she said, "Yeah, I keep seeing the 6 and the 8 of spades." And it was the 7 of spades that had gone missing. So she was picking up the outlying cards, but she never specifically said that the missing card was number 7. But she had a 1 in 52 chance to pick those cards.
Right.
And then the only other thing that was really interesting is during the seance part, she was trying to figure out the spirit's name, and I didn't even know what the dad's name was, and she kept hearing a P, and she said, "It's got to be Peter because I keep hearing p, p, p." And he said, "No, it's not Peter." And then she picked up the tape measure from the garage, and she said, "It's Paul." And it turned out that it was Paul. And so it was just really interesting that you had like 5 or 6 different things from somebody that had absolutely no case knowledge at all that we were just able to corroborate, and the family was able to corroborate.
Right.
And we corroborated it not in front of her as well. So we tried to keep her as completely distant from it as possible. So that's what really blew my mind away. So I was so impressed, and so were my other investigators that were there, that we decided to ask her to become a member of our organization, and we want to have her tested. There's one organization down the States called the Forever Family Foundation, which still tests mediums, and they do a battery of tests. A lot of them fail at the first couple times. So we're going to try and get her tested through the Forever Family Foundation.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very good.
So, I mean, I believe in certain people have the ability for sure, like, but you know, you do have to be careful. There's a lot of unethical people out there. Darryll calls them grief vampires, I think.
Don't hold back, Darryll. Tell it like it is.
Unfortunately, I didn't coin the phrase, but yeah, they're the ones where you're paid to go in the auditorium, and what you don't know is that while you've been standing in line, there've been confederates of the psychic, you know, and then there's tape recordings of people, and also the cold reading and blah, and it just keeps on going down the list of all the ways that they can pretend to be, you know, talking to whoever. But yeah, so there's nothing I can, even Jody, I mean, I can't make a comment on that because, well, one thing, I wasn't there, but two was I don't know her, and she hasn't been tested, and I haven't tested her or anything, so I can't even say yay or nay or things. So this is one of the things that where I have to say, not just I don't know, is that I just can't have any comment because I don't have enough.
So you're basing this on mediumship. Like, what about research? Per se,
what about
because
research?
Well, yeah, like paranormal investigators, people who are brought into somebody's house. Like, I've always thought my point of view in being asked to investigate a location was from a point of privilege, that somebody was entrusting themselves and their family to me and my team to either represent them, you know, and look and see what's going on, because it's a pretty serious thing, whether there's something there or not. Something is leading them to believe that there's something there. So the priority has to be the family. It's not about, let's just say I don't go in with the attitude, I don't investigate anymore, but I never went in with the attitude as, well, you're lucky we're here. It was always, thank you for allowing us to do this for you, you know, and let us take the weight for a little while. There's
right? Definitely, I think you see it more with like the amateur organizations, or the ones like you said that might have got their education off of the television.
Yes,
for sure. That is one complaint that we hear, is that the investigators come in with all their fancy equipment, tramp around the home, and then leave. And sometimes
they make things worse.
Sometimes they can make things worse. Sometimes the family has to hire somebody or contact somebody else, you know, to investigate, because the other group didn't do anything. They just came in and left. So there's certainly some unethical things, and that's the problem with the paranormal, is it's not policed by, you know, any sort of association or accreditation or anything like that.
But do you think it's because it's looked at as a more of an entertainment thing because of television? Like, I don't know that people look at it.
I know some people that do it just for fun. Like, they're not really out there trying to collect an EVP to send off to a university to have analyzed. They're just, you know, they enjoy going to certain spots and just, you know, playing around basically. But there is a movement within academia right now to do what's called the citizen scientist kind of program, where they're trying to get the amateur groups to start following some guidelines, protocols and things like that, just in the event that they do happen to capture something, because academia recognizes that there's so many different people out there. There's probably hundreds of ghost hunters. Even though I don't like the term, but hundreds of ghost hunters out there that are collecting audio, video, going to locations, having experiences, but they're not documenting them properly. So they're basically worthless, you know, in the world of academia. So there's a push to kind of get some training and some best practices going.
I think also, I don't know how many people would Like, do they care about academia? Because it's not governed. If you're not doing anything with this stuff, I guess.
I don't think the majority of like the amateur organizations do. I would be very, surprised if they had a subscription to any journals or anything like that, or take the time to read some of the papers. And some of the papers are very boring.
So are the investigations. They're not kidding.
I always said, if you're having a fun time, you're doing it the wrong way.
Exactly.
That's true.
Exactly. Yeah. All you want to do is just like curl up on the couch somewhere, or put back the coffee. Like, I think people need to realize when you're seeing something on television, you're seeing an hour or half an hour out of a night or a weekend, or that's just how little you end up getting, if anything.
Yeah, you guys have both been on many television series, so you would know. I mean, even me, I filmed last year two different days for the Hulu show, History Channel show, Repossessed, and it might have turned out to be maybe 5 minutes of airtime.
I know.
So
I know. You don't get a whole lot.
No, it's definitely cut down. And I mean, Darryll and I have like inside knowledge as well that the networks are looking for. We were told a scare factor every 3 minutes, and they don't want scientific people on there telling people that
they don't. I've turned down a lot. I finally got to the point that I did it. I filmed a documentary last year, and I basically just said no. I consult on a lot. I help to do creative stuff with different production companies, but I just completely retired from television shows on the matter because I can't. I think you just get to the point where it's just like you do things, you start off with good intentions, and like I said, you end up with that like the stereotypical stuff, and I'm just like, I don't want to continue it because everybody's like, when are we going to see you do something? And it's just like, I think you switch gears after a while. And it's not that I didn't enjoy doing it. I did. It was part of my journey that I had to do. And I think, though, we do get to a point where we evolve from that and you start seeing things and realizing similarities. Like for me, the field of the paranormal is very connected to ufology. I mean, half the cases I work with, no kidding. And I've done hundreds of cases throughout 20 years. There have been extraterrestrial sightings during an alleged, infestation or attachments. And so now I have to re-question and re-examine everything going, okay, so were they using portals? Were they really experiencing, were they contactees, experiencers? Like, it makes you question everything. So then it's like, well, what do I have to re-examine every one of those that I've done now? So now it's just like, I know from what people tell me, usually what the issue is, just, after a few years, few decades, you figure it out, because they're all different, but they're not really. There's a lot of, they're all pretty similar if you ask the right questions. Right. So I think you guys and the way you do things, it's a matter of the technicalities behind it, and you're looking at everything through, I guess, I like to say logical eyes, and that continues to grow because science continues to grow, and hopefully academia continues to grow with it.
Yeah, I think things will only get better. I mean, we're seeing some great progress, like we said earlier, with near-death experiences. So, I think the secrets of consciousness could be unlocked soon.
It'd be nice if it was.
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, we don't know what consciousness is and where it's at and all that, which is fascinating, and and that's what brings a lot of people into the field eventually, because they are doing consciousness studies. And then, of course, part of that is the after death experiences, but also deathbed visions. And that's usually the middle step, because you have to talk about, we're going to talk about consciousness, you have to talk about deathbed visions and why
out-of-body experiences.
Yeah. And then and then you're into near-death experiences. And so it brings a lot of people into the field. When they started out, they were just going to be a neurobiologist. and they wanted to know about whatever, and they had to take consciousness studies, obviously, and so then they realized there's a lot more questions than what we and then answers, not just in the physiological realm, but also in the psychological and parapsychological realm. So it's I find it seems to be as the silly stuff on TV, the crap, has gotten bigger, but it's kind of dragged institutions along a little bit, if only because they want to put on what's real or what's possible real to counter the BS that's on TV. And so I'm finding that a lot of universities now are starting to put on at least a course or more, including more sections on parapsychology than have ever before, because of the interest, and also because they're keeping an eye on the crap part of it. And so it's the ethics is just completely of TV there is no ethics on TV. I mean, what are we talking about here? But it's like asking for looking for tropical trees in the Arctic. It's you're just not going to find it, and because TV is the paranormal is boring. I mean, ESP psychokinesis is rare and it's weak, and that's about as strong as parapsychologists can say at the moment. Peter Underwood, British investigator of the unknown and ghosts in particular, president of the Ghost Club. This was when he was only in 40 years. So I think he was in, before he died, he was in about 50 some odd years into looking for ghosts. He said at this point, he said, this has been 42 years I've been looking for a ghost and I haven't seen one yet.
Wow.
So it's you got to be in for the long haul. And when it happens, like it did for me, you're going to be really surprised or just frozen for a minute because you're not really expecting to see it. And then all of a sudden that thing that you've been wanting all your life or whatever is suddenly there, and you're just struck dumb because you just can't quite process what you did see. And so by the time you do process and everything, the moment is gone. So
do you think parapsychology has all the answers? I mean, some people who are wide open psychically, they don't practice publicly, they don't do readings, they don't do anything, and they have like phenomenal experiences. And yet you have people who just absolutely want nothing to do with it, and they get the experiences whether they like it or not. But I mean, there's just so many different cultures that speak of things. Like, let's touch on reincarnation quickly. Where does that fit in with parapsychology? I mean, culturally speaking, and like Buddhism, it's all about reincarnation.
Yeah, I think it has a religious perspective to it for some religions. I know Darryl's a little bit more skeptical of reincarnation, and some of it is valid. Like Darryll talks about, how parents can talk about certain things maybe around kids, or kids are within earshot. We never really know when they're listening to us. They can pick up on stuff. Sometimes I think Meadow's face is buried in an iPad, and no, she heard what Mommy and Daddy are talking about. So I do think that there's some blurred lines there. I do think that there were some really great cases of reincarnation as well. I know the University of Virginia's perceptual studies unit there has been doing quite a bit of work with reincarnation. I just hope that it's a choice. I hope that
you just don't want to get your butt just smacked right back on planet Earth.
I just don't know if I can keep up with the cost of living if I keep living on. So
true.
Things are never going to get cheaper. They're
Please
only
put me back in upper class. Yeah.
So I do not want to.
Well, Elliot, I mean, it doesn't matter what you are. It's how you identify yourself. So you just start identifying yourself as a very rich person, right? And they identify themselves as very
manifestation. We're talking about manifesting your reality, Elliot.
So essentially reincarnation is that. I mean, it's identifying yourself as something, whether or not it's true or not. I mean, and like I said, you can see it, of course, in the gender studies, but too. But it's, I mean, if you could self-identify yourself as anything, well, then I'd be young, handsome, and dating Timothy Chalamet. But we know that that hasn't happened, won't happen.
I adore you, Darryll. Just saying.
That's about the same chance of some reincarnation being true. But I seriously thought, I'm just making a joke about this. Right. But on a serious note, not about dating Timothée Chalamet, but on a serious note, I don't know what to say about reincarnation. The jury's out for me. And like Elliot said, there are some good studies being done. There's also been a lot of bad studies that have been, and stories that have been rebutted. So it's just and I just sort of don't have the time. And it's funny because I like near-death experiences, but I don't really have time to think about that. What's after death, and can we come back, and do we get a choice? And I'm like Elliot, I wouldn't come back. No, seriously, I don't think I would. It would all, can't see it. Right. I want to move on, learn something new, not come back and start all over again. Right. And so, yeah, I'm looking for answers. I don't want to have to, do this 27, like, which is,
I hope you have the choice. Yeah. That's
which is the religion that says you have to do it so many times before you get to the answers. Is it Buddhism or is it Taoism or one of them anyway? Yeah. And it's like, no, I'll just wait and God can tell me the answer, or whoever or whatever, I need. I'll find know the answer then.
Right. Yeah. And the reincarnation, Darryll has a good point too. There was a time where they were all coming out through hypnosis, and hypnosis had a bit of a problem in psychology in general. I think it was during the 80s. They were using hypnosis on psychotherapy patients, and a lot of them were saying that they were sexually assaulted, and there was a ton of false sexual assault allegations that had come out, and the APA actually had to send out, the American Psychological Association actually had to send out to anyone that was registered under them to stop using hypnosis for that purpose until they could kind of figure out the situation. So but recently, though, I find the recent work with reincarnation stuff has been pretty good, especially by Dr. Jim Tucker. He's the one that's associated with University of Virginia. And the one interesting thing I find that they found about reincarnation is that it seems to be after the age of 7 that children start to lose those memories of their previously reincarnated life. So you have to do your investigation when they're still fairly young and not obviously mentally developed. So
right. Do you think some of it can be like passed down, ancestral DNA imprinting, that sort of thing? Because let's face it, like if we have somebody who, like, let's say my grandfather would have died in the war, and he's well, no, won't say died in the war, but let's just say we have a family who's wounded, okay, or had a very traumatic experience, and it goes on to have children. That eventually, that memory, imprints on them, and imprints on, like, moving down the line. Right? Do you acknowledge that theory at all?
I do. I understand what you're saying, and you've got me thinking, actually, because I think that it would be really interesting because there has been cases where, for example, there was a child that thought he was a pilot, and he had died in a crash, and the child started having these nightmares about a plane crash, and they were able to put it together that he was this pilot named Jack Larson. And sometimes they can go out and visit relatives of the person that is being reincarnated, but I don't know of any studies where they've taken the child's DNA and kind of compared it to the reincarnated person, because that would be very interesting to see if there's any sort of, even if it showed up that they were somehow like distant cousins or third cousins or something like that in the genetic makeup.
Who knows?
But other than, like, I haven't really heard of a ton of studies where you've had like your mother thought she was reincarnated and her mother thought she was reincarnated, kind of like that. But there have been studies where mediumship abilities have been proven to be passed down genetically.
Yes.
So there's definitely stuff that gets passed down, but with reincarnation, I don't think so. From everything that I've read, it's seem to be completely different families. But in today's world now, I would be apt to ask everyone for a blood sample and just do the test and just check it out. But that's also the police officer in me as well. Because
that's right.
I'm very thorough. I'd be stealing everyone's DNA and testing it.
Right. Oh no. Real quick, cryptozoology, because we're heading to the top of the hour, but I'd like to squeeze that one in. What are your thoughts?
That's one of Darryl's favorites.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is Darryl's favorite. That's what got Darryll into this whole thing.
Right.
I believe, okay, very quickly and concisely, which is really not me. I do believe in the possibility of Bigfoot in very small numbers in a very localized area. He can't be he's not everywhere there's a tree or a little bit of a hill. It's got to be like the Pacific Northwest, completely isolated and everything.
Right.
He's not in a desert and he's not in a swamp.
Right.
Get that? And, well, I can't go into the rest of it because I've done studies into over 7,000 Bigfoot reports, and if I give it away now, then my book will be useless. But I can only just say that they're going about it the wrong way, and they'll never find Bigfoot the way that they're doing it. But anyway, as for the other things, I have a friend who's really big into Thunderbird. He just loves the idea that the Thunderbird, they have that picture. I mean, there's about 2 different pictures, maybe even 3 historical pictures of people standing next to, this huge bird.
But did you notice that one of those pictures was a freaking pterodactyl?
Yeah, exactly. And now next year, I'll be doing haunted tours of castles in England, Scotland, and Ireland. Yeah. And for the Scotland one in the fall, obviously we're going to be going to Castle Urquhart, if only because it's on Loch Ness. And then I'm going to stop on the way back home. I'm going to stop in Iceland because they have a sea monster as well as a sea monster museum. And no, Ellie, it's not because they also have a penis museum either. And then when I get back to here, I'll do a few around here, and then I'll probably do a paper on it or something like that. But yeah, I want to go to Loch Ness. But sea monsters, lake monsters. Do you think they could be coming through portals? Because they've shown Loch Ness. I've been to Scotland. I've been there, and they say it cannot sustain a creature that big. It can't. Not as described or believed. It can't be a pterosaur or a pterosaur, or that'd be something. Can't be a plesiosaur because they're air breathing, cold-blooded thing. So what else is it? And there's some good theories about what it might be. They'd be very boring if it was proved, unfortunately. But it's still fascinating zoologically speaking. Like whether it's mutated eels or whatever.
That'd be a pretty big eel.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That's most of those ones really big. Those are actually waves, and sometimes the conversion of 2 waves, and so or wakes of boats. And so it's cryptozoology. I keep my ear and eye on it because I think there's more there. It'll be easier to prove something because we have, or cryptozoologists have, over the years proved things. Whereas and us, we're still trying to figure out whether a ghost is, what nature is before we even get to finding one. We're
such a good point, Darryll, because like the mountain gorilla in Africa, for example, wasn't discovered until 1902. But people were reporting these mountain gorillas, but there wasn't any. There was only lowland gorillas at the time, and that was just over almost 150 years ago that we discovered that. So, and there's been other things too. We're discovering these new squids and giant squids and all this stuff too. So,
or the little human, Homo floresiensis.
They're just little dudes.
The 3-foot human. There is another
like modern. Human. I won't say modern day Hobbit, but that seemed that was how they were tagging.
We're finally alive. Awesome thing. Here's the goosebumps. We're finally alive with another species of man. or human. And there may be others out there, but we always thought we were the winners, the gold medal winners, and Neanderthals, well, you were silver, see you later, too bad, and all this stuff. But we're learning that we're not alone. And the dentists, if you go into China and Russia, of course, they have their own cryptozoological hominids, and they are closer to a human than Bigfoot is, because Bigfoot very much is, other than bipedalism, it is very much an ape. Right. And who knows what we're going to find. And of course, the fossil record is still very, the
Bigfoot thing's got a lot of quantum stuff that go along with it too, like there's this research is going off into a little bit of a different direction with it, at least with that part of crypto.
See, that's where, and I don't know if Darryll might be on the same page with me. That's where I start to kind of become skeptical with the quantum stuff. I could totally, just with say Bigfoot, for example, because it used to just be Bigfoot sightings. Then it was Bigfoot sightings and a UFO was in the neighborhood. Did the UFO drop the Bigfoot off and all this stuff? And then there's talk about them, are they able to enter portals? And that's why we can't find them in the woods and things like that. But I mean, you look at the case of the mountain gorilla, people were reporting that, never proven until 1902. I believe it was a military officer, German officer had found it. And then, like I said, the giant squid, and we're just kind of learning all these new creatures that exist.
People who use quantum,
what they've hidden from us for forever.
Parapsychology. Anybody uses the words quantum when they're talking about parapsychological theories or cryptozoological theories doesn't know what quantum is. Because it has not. Quantum is the stuff we can't see. It's invisible to us. It's on the micro level. On the level we are, and we exist day to day, that's Newtonian physics, and that's the macro level. So there's that dynamic where you have to be. Quantum is kind of like our unconscious, and
so what would you call it then? Because there have been experiencers, who have seen these beings, and they follow them. They'll just chase right after them, and they come into footsteps that stop. Nothing. They look up. They look around. There's nothing. Crickets gone. Nothing. Footsteps and here.
Those are rare. I mean, extremely rare, and so therefore that. You go by again logic, rationality as far as you can. You go as far as you can logically and rationally. Yeah. And at the moment, I mean, if they disappear in a UFO, that's obviously using one unknown to prove another. But for if they could disappear like that, quantum into some kind of quantum singularity or whatever, that would probably destroy half the Earth if they did. We would be able to do it. It would happen to us, and it would happen a lot, and it wouldn't just be out in the woods, people getting lost in the woods. So, I personally can't see how you could control yourself quantumly. It's too,
right.
Yeah, too small. It's an interesting, no, don't get me wrong. Oh, and one thing I want to say before we end up, and this is, you guys are going to love this. A lot of people, a lot of scientists, complain about us parapsychologists or cryptozoologists because we're not scientific enough, and we're irrational and we believe these crazy things and all that. Okay, that's fine, and some of it's fair, but I don't want to hear a word from an astrophysicist or some cosmologist or anything I have to do with astronomy.
I would even say
that we're not scientific, because most of that is either a mathematical equation or guessing. The Big Bang Theory, gone. Okay, poof. That's it. It went. It was never proven, obviously, but so much of it is Schrodinger's cat. That's not even what it is. That's not what it is. It's, as it's reported. I mean, all these things are thought experiments. A lot of it's just sitting around thinking up, like Freud, and we all know how good he was. By the way, And so anyway, we in psychology have not lived Freud down yet. But so I don't want to, I'll listen to criticism from anybody, but the field of the stars, because a lot of their stuff is guessing, you know, and some of it's logical, some of it's rational, and some of it's going to be wrong just because it is. But also a lot of it is, you know, it's just guessing and, you know, and mathematical formula. So I'll take, I'll take my blows for believing in Bigfoot and ghosts, although I don't know what they are. You know, I'll take my lumps for that.
It's a learning experience. It's a journey.
Exactly.
I mean, some people have experiences full on and they just don't acknowledge them. And it's like, it doesn't exist. Other people beg for an experience and never have it. So I think at this point, all you can do is you keep an open mind. But it's like I was saying before the show started, you keep an open mind. If I see something that looks potentially real, like where I could say, okay, this is a real thing, for me, all it does is it means that it opens the door for further research. Yep. Don't shelve it. Don't chuck it under the carpet. This is something worthy of further research. Yep. You know, it just keep going.
And unfortunately, there's not enough good research being done because of the fact that both cryptozoology and parapsychology, there's no governing body. There is amateurs, and they're mostly now it's TV amateurs or legend trippers, what they're called, where you travel somewhere just to experience, say, Transylvania, Dracula's castle, and unfortunately, what it has, it's given a bad name to the field, and like I said before, academia is starting to kind of push back a bit by offering more courses, but unfortunately we're under a deluge of just misinformation and disinformation. So, but you're right. Anything has to be looked at because right now all of our theories are probably wrong, about ghosts and that, because we don't know. There's not enough there.
It's all theory.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, and it's fun. Until a ghost materializes, slaps you in the face and says, "Take a picture," which the chances of that happening are pretty slim.
No, probably less than my dating Timothy Chalamet.
And I find
a snort out of you yet tonight.
I find parapsychological work is like trying to drill straight through the earth. Like you can only go down so far, and then you just kind of hit literally rock bottom. It's the same with parapsychology. Like no matter what topic you're investigating, whether it's ESP or psychokinesis or survival, you can only go so far, and then you're just left with more questions than you are answers at this point, unfortunately. And that is still one of the reasons why. A lot of the hard scientists, so your physics and your biology and all that, they don't want to get involved with parapsychology.
Yeah, because it's an existence that we can't touch and knock or eat or feel or anything.
Can't replicate. Can't produce it on demand. It's all, spontaneous human experiences that we're investigating. And that's why parapsychology is considered a social science, because we're investigating people's experiences.
Right. Yeah. Well, I wanted to make a quick comment going back, to ghosts and going back in time. And when you're doing voice recordings, how you should put yourself back in that time and place and maybe try to figure out what did that person see? What did that person experience? A friend of mine was at a fort in Ontario, and they were on a tour of this fort, 1812, and they had something was kept touching the camera. And so they had a long lens on it, film camera, right? And they were trying to take a photo, and something kept slapping the camera out of the way. And then they came to the realization, because they kept saying, well, I want to, can I shoot you? Can I just take an image? But it said Canon on the camera. So did they, they kept slapping, like the camera kept getting jolted like this. And you're aiming at somebody saying, well, no, I'm going to shoot and take take a picture. They're thinking, were they possibly thinking, Canon, don't point that thing at me. Right? Sometimes it's just, that's just one example of other examples. Whenever I would try to teach, okay, if if you want to do voice recordings, then put yourself, ask logical ask questions. Don't, if somebody doesn't realize they're dead, for example, saying, anybody here? It's like, well, yes, I'm here. Don't you see me? What's wrong with you? Like, we just, I think, have to start being more creative in our research, and maybe you will get, better results. So here's the time, guys. Plug away.
Yes, big event coming up here, not this weekend, but next weekend. It's Thanksgiving weekend for us up here in Canada. It's the 2023 Halifax Paranormal Symposium. It's going to be held at the Halifax Tower Hotel and Conference Center, which is in Bayers Lake. It's a fairly new hotel. Darryll and I were one of the first people to book the Lakeland Hall, which is where it's going to be held at. Saturday, October 7th from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. There are still tickets available, ppri.net/tickets. We've had tickets being sold every day this week so far. So, which is kind of the heads up we got, is usually the last week before the symposium, the tickets will really start taking off. Got 5 guest speakers. We're going to touch on demonology. We're going to touch on ghosts and hauntings. We're going to touch on UFOs. And we're going to talk on a little bit of psychic mediumship there with Kim Moser. Her presentation is called a Spirit Paranormal Awakening. Lauren Coleman is a cryptozoologist, so he's going to focus on creatures that have been reported and cited in Nova Scotia, such as a Wendigo, apparently.
No, Wendigo, never mind.
Darryll's going to talk about Are Ghosts Extinct, which we touched on a little bit tonight. Richard Gallagher is going to talk about his work with the Catholic Church and his belief in demonic possession when he can't find a DSM-5 diagnosis. And Chris Stiles is going to be talking about his new book, Clear Sweep 5, which is about 2 underwater USOs, I guess, unidentified submerged objects, where the divers apparently told Chris that they saw and filmed extraterrestrials repairing it, and gave the footage to the Canadian government, which is conveniently missing. So I think it'll be a great weekend, actually, but it's a one day only. I know I'm really excited. Darryll and I wanted to do this for many years, and we finally sat down after COVID and made it happen.
Right.
And you can find out all the information about the conferences as well is at ppri.net.
Right. And somebody was mentioning Shag Harbor. A couple of people mentioned Shag Harbor early on in the stream. Chris Stiles, who's been on the show a couple of times to talk about it. He's been on a few times, but specifically about Shag Harbor. If you guys head out to this symposium, maybe you can just corner him and ask him about Shag Harbor.
Yeah, he's a great resource. Great resource.
He's a great talker. He knows every little detail, doesn't he, Elliot?
Yes, he does. His memory is very sharp, and he's a bulldog. Like, he digs and digs, and that's how he ended up getting some of these government documents to prove that there was a USO incident off Shelburne. Because where this kind of stemmed from, just quickly, I know we're running out of time, there was always a second story to Shag Harbor. So, October 4th, 1967, object crashes in the water, RCMP responds, Canadian Navy responds, Coast Guard, U.S. Coast Guard. All these agencies come up. They saw kind of like a yellow pale foam on top of the water. That's it. Object can't find anything, can't find any debris, can't find any survivors. Then the second story is that the UFO kind of moved up the coast, went to Shelburne. A second UFO came down, helped it repair itself, and then it flew off. And so Chris Stiles was always chasing this dead end lead. And it wasn't until he talked to a Navy diver and he was able to piece some puzzles, put some pieces of the puzzle together.
Fantastic story.
Found out, the name of some ships, did some government document pulling, and was able to come up with this great story. And I'm looking forward to his presentation. So
it's a great story. It never gets old when he talks about it, and he always adds stuff. Like, why am I only hearing this now? Why didn't you talk about this before?
Yeah, I can't wait to get his book.
Yeah.
He told me not to buy it, so I'm going to get him to sign a copy for me at the symposium.
Yeah. Hold him to that. Well, guys, it's always a pleasure. You guys are always a hoot. I just love having you on, and I'd love to do it again. I'd love to do it again, maybe at the beginning of the year. Maybe you could talk about how it went, and let's pull off some more Let's pull off some more things to just totally.
Oh, it sounds great. We've been trying to do an episode of the Dueling Parapsychologist, and we've just been so busy with the symposium coming up. So it
Do
kind
you
of
need a
feels
network?
like
I know somebody.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we
Well,
might.
Michelle, around Christmas time is in England, in Europe, have a lot of good creepy ghost stories, and this because that's their culture, tell ghost stories, whereas we do it at Halloween. So just suggesting, not necessarily us, but just a suggestion, you should have somebody talking about the Coast of Christmas, talking about.
Do you know somebody? I've done segments on it, but I would love to do. Do you do that?
Do I do that? Yes, I love ghost stories around Christmas.
Really? I do too. I love the whole Victorian part of it with the crazy cards and.
Yes.
Okay.
It's wild.
Okay, I'm going to message you, but you have to answer this time. And I've got Christmas dates. If you want to do it, I have like 2-3 dates left in December, and I would love to do it.
Yeah, it's fun.
It is really fun. It's great. Back then, that was a thing to do. You didn't give gifts. You gave a story.
Yeah, exactly.
And a cool, crazy card. I love it. Okay, I'm down. I'll message you. I'll give you some dates.
Okay, yeah. You've got my email, also 902-414-9535 if you want text. And you've got my email.
I'll remember that.
Yeah. Well, you'll replay it.
Yeah.
This, right?
Fast forward to the end.
And if not, then Darryll bdwalsh@gmail.com. So
okay, I'm going to email you.
And
as far as I know, Elliot got my email, so I know you're going to get it.
Yeah, you're back in action.
I'll remember this time to answer you.
That's right. I'll just keep resending. Click resend.
Yeah,
resend. I can do that. Resend.
You've got lots of space now.
I do have lots of space, man. You guys better watch it. It's coming for you. All right, guys. Thank you, and I will be in touch.
Thanks for having us.
Sounds good.
Take care.
All right, guys.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Well, we've come to the end of another fantastic segment, guys. And wow, it was interesting to say the least, even though some people were being naughty in the chat room. Not nice. Not nice to the guests means you're not being nice to me. So let's kind of watch that moving forward, please. Anyway, thank you, Folgers Coffee, for sponsoring tonight's show. Tonight, every night. We appreciate you so very much. Thank you, Justin Snicker, for providing us with your views, your music, your voice. And that intro is something else. And we thank you for that. Thank you, Steve McGinnis, for your artwork. We appreciate you so very much. Next week, okay, we've got 2 new faces. So we're going to be welcoming, and I have to say it's a recording. I will be in chat because this guest came all the way from Poland. So really, 9-hour difference is really very difficult. So his name is Alexander, and I hope I don't just butcher this, which is Cheskowitz. And this young man, and he is a young man, at 17 years old, wrote a book called Deja Vu, Has Everything Already Been? And boy, oh boy, he translated it at 19, and it talks about a lot of ancient history, and just, you have to listen to it. I've read this book, and I've never interviewed anybody quite like this young man. Just a wonderful, wonderful interview. So check him out. Thursday night, live show with Mark Dawidziak, and he's going to be discussing his book, A Mystery of Mysteries, The Death and Life of Edgar Allan Poe. We're getting into spooky month, people, and I think this is where it's going to start. So thank you. I appreciate you all for being here, and we will see you next week. Have a great weekend.